but then he answers all their questions. 6. Winter vacation. Time to stay up late and sleep in. But Fitz, afraid his students will forget their physics lessons, summons them to school. 7. It's 9 a.m. Sleep-groggy students arrive, yawning for their roll call with Fitz. Later, energized with caffeine and junk food, resistance declines, thinking accelerates, momentum increases, and the room's abuzz with students equating. I'm almost over. 8. It's second period, bioscience. Sound waves emanate from the open door of Fitz's classroom and reverberate down the hall. I close my classroom door. 9. It's April Fool's. Fitz, in room 208, teaches English. While I, in 206, explain a math equation. Funny, he really could teach English, but I definitely can't teach math. 10. At the sound of yet another interruption flying from the mouth of a bawdy student, even the brilliant Fitz sometimes mixes up his words. 11. Fitz quotes, "More talk, less work." Or, "Everyone who isn't in this room, get out!" Favorite. If anyone's absent, raise your hand. It's May. Oops, 12. It's May. Time to take the physics AP. Fitz has done his best to prepare them, but it's up to the students to prove to him how much they've learned. 13. It's June. And Fitz is going to retire. He won't return to room 206 in the fall, but he surely won't be forgotten. He will always hold a special place in the hearts and minds of students who have been lucky enough to have been taught by you, Fitz. I'll miss you. Thank you.
I worked for Larry Tash for the first 7 of my 8 years here at Reed, and watching him work is like watching an artist in action. You walk into his office, you say your piece, he says his, and you walk out thinking, well, I've done it. And it's only later that you realize that not only did you not get any of what you wanted, but you probably gave up some of what you had. Is it any wonder he's been promoted? Ladies and gentlemen, the former principal of Walter Reed Middle School, Mr. Larry Tash.
You know what, this day reminds me, I think for most of us, of The Wizard of Oz, and Judy Garland clicking her heels and saying there's no place like home. And I don't know about students and parents that are here today, but this is a very special moment. Not just because Fitz is here, but because I was asked to come and speak. And I have to remind you that some of you that weren't here then, but in 1989 when I first came, the IHP program was the most important thing at the school. And the school was being seen in the community as not such a stellar place for all of our community to want their kids to go. Someone from the district office told me, Larry, you may not be able to hold on to that program that existed from 1970-71. And I went back to my wife and I told my wife, no matter what happens during the time that I'm at Walter Reed, one thing for sure, IHP is not going to die while I'm the principal. And I want to congratulate our teachers and parents and students for not letting us. One of the changes from 1989 is to read my notes, I have to put glasses on now. But I can't see you, but I can see my notes. You know, that's that time that you were thinking about moving to the high school. You really did make the most important decision of your life staying at Walter Reed. And the reason it's even more important to me now maybe than it was then is there's no question in my mind that working with young people in the middle school age is the most important work of teachers and administrators in any district in America. This is the age that our children are most vulnerable and can be pushed and guided in the direction we want them to go. And I'm proud that you made the decision to stay, and thank you very much for that. You know, I heard all these stories about Fitz when I first came to Walter Reed, and I worried because these stories are about people knowing him at a national level, not just in our own local community or in our district. And I remember being told from downtown that Fitz is teaching this advanced math class, but there's something wrong with that advanced math class. Kids can't go from algebra to calculus in 3 years without covering the entire curriculum. And Fitz, I don't know if you remember that day that you and I sat down and page by page went through the math analysis like I knew what I was talking about, and you actually found that there was a hole in your curriculum that you promised me you'd fix. Did you do that? If you didn't, I'm going to have to write you up. I also remember my first year that I walked into the physics class, and this was sometime in late 1989, and I walk in and Fitz has these students talking to each other. The last thing they seem like they're doing is listening to what Fitz has to say. But then I noticed, I was standing with the assistant principal who had been there before me. How do they know what's going on? And then Fitz asks a question. And every single hand in the room went up. And I turned to the assistant principal and I said, how in the heck did they even hear what he asked? But I later was told by many of you parents that your children have to be multitasking at all times. Is that still the case? Fitz knew better than me, that's for sure. You know, I have some stories where I had to sit with Fitz and some parents. I hope those parents aren't here today. I couldn't embarrass anyone. But where Fitz was so angry at a child that he was putting him out of a chemistry class, the AP chemistry, and the parent was devastated. The child was crying. Fitz is in there explaining all the work that he had done to try to get the child to make it. And at the end came because I had no idea what I was going to do with this overzealous parent who wasn't going to leave me alone if the decision wasn't right. Fitz says, you know what? I'm willing to take your son back on 2 conditions. One is in the class he doesn't disturb instruction, and 2, on the weekends I can come over until he's caught up to the rest of the class. We're talking about a man who's not only intense but has a heart as big as theirs. In the 11 years I was here with Fitz, he only made one mistake that I'm aware of. And Fitz, you probably remember, we were sitting at a faculty meeting, and the state had just announced that based on state test scores for each school, faculties were going to receive funding, money, personal money, if the school's test scores reached a certain level. Do you remember that, Fitz? I'll tell you, because I remember it well. Fitz yells out in front of the faculty, let's not push to get good scores the first year. Then the next year we'll get even higher scores and we'll make more money. Once again, Fitz was being logical. However, I turned to Fitz and I said, Fitz, I know you're kidding. I'm not sure he was, but Well, what ended up happening is that year, the test scores at Walter Reed were amongst the highest in the entire district and the state. And every employee of Walter Reed did receive funds that year, Fitz. And if we would have waited to the next year, the state cut the budget and we wouldn't have gotten anything. So that was the one year I know that you this morning in the newspaper, in the Daily News, there was a young girl that made a comment about Fitz, that I guess when Fitz got out of school, he went to Louisiana doing something in the oil wells, and he decided that maybe teaching would be a greater satisfaction for him. The child's response was that how much that she and other students appreciate Fitz's choice to go into teaching. But the reality was, what she commented on was, because Fitz could have had a better job. Well, the real reality is, well, there is no job more satisfying that gives you more success or has more importance than what you've given all of the students and families here today and for many years. And actually, what you've done has moved on to the rest of the world, and we all congratulate you today on your many successes and making the right choice to be in education. Thanks for all of it.
Now it's my turn. It was my privilege to teach across the hall from Fitz for 8 years. You always knew that if there was food coming out of the window, or if a 7th grader was being dangled by the ankles, that Fitz was not in the room. Or then again, maybe he walked. Fitz had a way of, or it still does actually, has a way of focusing on something so intensely that he is oblivious to everything going on around him. In my first year here, he took a group of students to UCLA for a symposium on evolution. So he sat down close to the speaker so that he wouldn't miss anything of this subject that fascinates him. His students found it a little more comfortable in the back of the lecture hall. It wasn't long before a few of them felt a little hungry. Some heard that there were particularly good restaurants in Westwood. So off they went, neglecting to tell Fitz. And after a lovely meal, they came back, they sat down, they looked at Fitz, who was still concentrating on the speaker's words. He never missed it. And on the way back to school, he said, "Well, did you learn anything?" And of course, there was a chorus of, "Oh, yes, Fitz, lots," that came from the students. I could remember one time, it was in the afternoon, about 4 o'clock, about an hour after all the kids had left. And I went across the hall to say something to Fitz. And I noticed that even after hours, 6 periods of very intense teaching, Fitz was looking intently at the computer screen. And his eyes were narrowed, and his brow was furrowed. And I thought,